Hi, my name is Pete Urich, and today I'm going to be talking to you about my book that I wrote with my best friend from college, Chris Schaefer. It's called Financial Goals. Actually, the prescript is setting and scoring financial goals. But ultimately, the whole entire idea is using soccer as a language in order to understand personal finance just that little bit better. Now, I know that money can be an extremely emotional topic, and for some people, can be a confusing topic. And our hope with this book and the ideas within it is to help demystify finances to a certain extent. And I'm going to go through a little presentation, and hopefully, it will help you and anybody that understands soccer a little bit understand a little bit better about how finances work. All right, so I'm going to start off with what this program is not. Rather than what it is, I'm going to start off with what it's not. First of all, it is not a get-rich-quick scheme, all right? You are not going to become a millionaire tomorrow based on the information that I am going to put across here. Now, there are very few of those types of things in the world, so unless you're buying lottery tickets or anything like that, and even those have some pitfalls that come along with them. But this is not a get-rich-quick scheme. All right. Number two, this is not a pyramid scheme. Okay. This is not something that you're going to be buying into in order to make $1 million tomorrow, or you've got to get five of your friends. No, this is just a video to help you understand money just a little bit better. Three, it's not a sales pitch. All right. We have a book. Yes. If you want to buy it, you're more than welcome to. But if you don't buy the book after watching this video, that's completely fine as well. And a lot of the information that's in the book is going to be in this presentation. And if all you do is watch this video from us and take it and run with somebody else's information, that's completely fine. Our goal is always for people to understand finance just that little bit better. And if you get intrigued on the ideas that we have and then go in another direction, that's completely fine. All right. It's not a sales pitch. And then finally, this is not financial advice. That sounds a little bit weird. I get it. I 100% understand that it seems like, oh my gosh, this must be financial advice. To a certain extent, I guess it is, but in the larger scope of things, I am just going to give you a lens through which to look at finance rather than telling you, buy Apple stock or do this or do that, which would be actual financial advice. I'm going to give you a lens through which to look at finances in the hopes that maybe you understand them just that little bit better. And this program and the book are intended for high school and or college kids in order to give them possibly a little bit of understanding before they get into the real world in the job market, et cetera, to understand finance just that little bit better. Okay, so let's start off with seeing the world differently. Okay, now in the 1980s, there was this weird movie called They Live. It was with Roddy Piper, a professional wrestler from the time. And basically he had these sunglasses that when he put them on, he could see that there were these people. I think they were supposed to be aliens. I never actually saw the movie. And then you've also got Free Guy, which was the Ryan Reynolds movie. Again, a movie I did not see, where he puts on the glasses and he can see all of the game that he's being a part of. Now, that is kind of what we're trying to do here. We're trying to get you to look at the world through a lens so that you can see things just a little bit differently. Obviously, all of us deal with money on a regular basis. I've got some in my pocket. Some of it is, some is not a lot. But anyway, what you end up with is you have a picture of how the monetary world works, and maybe through looking through this lens that I'm going to give to you is actually going to help you just understand things just that little bit better. It's going to start off with David Foster Wallace. Okay, this is water. Now, if you've never watched it, there's this great speech given by David Foster Wallace. It was actually a commencement speech, but somebody took it and put it along to a video, and basically it starts off with there's two young fish swimming in one direction and an older fish swimming in the opposite direction. And the older fish says to the young fish, "Hey boys, how's the water?" The two young fish get a little bit farther along, and one looks at the other and says, "What the hell's water?" And the truth of the matter is that the fish is the last one to recognize that he is or she is in water. It's so pervasive, it's so all around them that they never realize that it's even there. And if you think about the human experience, we had to discover air, we had to discover gravity, we had to discover a whole bunch of different things that impact our lives on a regular basis. One of the questions that I'll often ask to a student or students in my classroom will be, what's the most important thing you're going to do today? I'm going to pose that question to you. All right, say it out loud if you're that brave, or just think it in your head. And the answer to that question is the same for everybody. The answer is breathe. The most important thing that you're going to do today is breathe. If you stop doing it for about 7 to 10 minutes, you're going to die. So even though that's something that is integral to our survival, we forget about it all the time because of the fact that it's all around us. And because of that human tendency to delete and or ignore things that we have just become accustomed to being in our view all the time, that's why I want you to look at the world through a slightly different lens. And that brings me to Robert Cialdini and his book, Influence. All right. Now, if you've never read this book, it's a great book. It was written in the 1980s. Robert Cialdini basically took all of the information that he learned from sales techniques and con men and a variety of other groups of people, and basically broke it down so that he simplified all of the people who are trying to influence you in the world, generally speaking, to try and get your money. But he used principles like scarcity, reciprocity, social proof, authority, liking, consistency, or commitment. And he used those as a framework to explain how marketers especially were trying to influence your interest in buying something, and then con men and all of those types of things as well. And if you think about it, you've run into these things before, and these tools are being used on you all the time. Things like scarcity. Oh, it's a 2-day sale. Okay, limited time offer. Those types of things you run into all the time. Reciprocity. How many times have you had somebody give you something and you feel this obligation to give something back? Those things are well ingrained in us. Okay, social proof is one of our biggest influencers in this world. Oh, everybody else is doing it, so therefore I feel like I have to. Teenagers run into that a lot. So recognizing the fact that there are forces that are influencing your decisions regularly, and being aware of those influences so that you can see them, so that when you start to hear things like limited time offer, you're like, oh, wait a minute, that is something that's being used to influence me. Do I actually want to do that thing or not? Because they're trying to pull a string in order to get you to do the action that they want, not particularly what you want. Okay, so here's the game plan. We're going to talk a little bit, very briefly, about 1980s soccer. Then we're going to talk about you being the manager or owner. Possession, not possessions. We'll get into that in just a few minutes. Formations, there'll be plenty of those. Building your team, the other team, and then defining success. So that's basically the roadmap of the directions that we're going to go over the next, 10, 15 minutes or so. 1980s soccer. Now, I grew up in the 1980s, and I started playing soccer when I was really young. This is one of the teams that I played on back in the day. And basically at that time, there weren't a lot of people who understood soccer. My dad in particular was the coach of several of my teams, and he had to read books and watch VHS tapes and things like that in order to understand the game better, because he played American football. And learning how to play soccer from people who didn't fully understand soccer is actually a pretty good metaphor for what we're talking about with regards to finance, okay? In the 1980s, there was the boom mentality, okay? And basically, when I was a kid, somebody on my team or the other team, but usually my team, because that's what I was paying attention to, somebody would kick the ball really far, and all of the parents would cheer and clap like something big had happened. But the ball went to the other team, and they never really picked up on the fact that that actually wasn't particularly anything that was helpful to our team, but it looked good. It didn't particularly, reap any fruit, but it did actually make everybody get excited for one reason or another. Eventually, I went to college and played soccer and things like that. And we started to figure out a lot more of what it was that we were actually trying to do with the game. But that boom mentality was prevalent in the 1980s. But you don't know until you know. You don't know what you don't know. All right. And that is the issue that we run into with the finance part of things is you don't actually know what you don't know until you know it. And we're hopeful that through looking through this lens of soccer to talk about finance will actually help simplify something that can be a relatively complex idea. So I'm going to ask you to be the manager. Now, whether your favorite team is PSG or Barcelona or Chelsea or Rangers, one of those big teams, the idea behind you being the manager means that you're in control. You are the one who has to make the decisions about what it is that you're going to do with your money. That's why I said early on that this is not financial advice. I am going to build a framework. I'm going to give you ideas about where it is that you could go with money, but I'm not going to tell you what to do. That's your job. You've got to figure out what to do with your money. You've got to be the one who is in control, making the decisions. Because as soon as you hand it off to somebody else, even if you do get professional help, which I'm all in favor of, you need to recognize that the ultimate responsibility falls back on you, that you are going to be the one who has to reap the rewards or suffer the consequences of whatever decisions are made. All right. And so being the manager is the exact perfect metaphor because you have to make the decisions about who it is that you want in the way of players, and we'll talk about what that's going to mean and what formations you're going to run and how you're going to move the ball forward in theory. Now, Messi era Barcelona, at the time when Messi was playing for Barcelona, Barcelona was largely considered one of the best teams in the world. And they were famous for keeping the ball way more than the other team. You would hear about Barcelona having 60, 70, 80% of the possession throughout a game. And they were dominant because of the fact that the other team never had the ball, so therefore the other team couldn't score. And we're going to use that thought process at least as a framework for looking at how you might want to run your own finances, because of the fact that the more money that you keep in your own pocket, the better for you. And hopefully you'll be able to progress yourself towards your financial goals. All right. Keeping your money is in your favor and might be interesting to take about a 15-second idea of what is money. Money is just portable power. Okay. You take whatever work that you have done or however else you have acquired money, and it gives you that ability to, in a future context, be able to buy something based off of the work or the item that you sold or whatever it is. All right. It is a representation of either goods or services that have been given in the past, and it's kind of a trading token. And we want you to keep as much of your money as it is that you want. Okay. Now, we do need to talk about an idea of inflation. Okay, now inflation is one of those things that's going to become really important over these next few years, and it's one of the things that's really a hot button item on the news at the moment and everything. But let's talk over on the sideboard for just a second. All right, so let's talk about this on the sideboard. All right, I was born in 1975. Obviously, some of you are much younger than I am. But the thing is in 1975, there was a certain amount of money. I don't have exact numbers. We don't really need to have exact numbers, all right? But my parents had just bought a house. I think they bought that house for something around $30,000, et cetera, et cetera. And what happens is the federal government has the ability to print more money. And basically what happens is, just like a soccer ball that has been inflated, okay, it gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And the more money that is printed means that if there was $1 that you had in 1975, okay, in 1975 you have $1, and that has a certain amount of purchasing power, okay? So the purchasing power in 1975, okay, you put 30,000 of those dollars together and you could buy the house that my parents lived in at the time, all right? But because of inflation, there's more money in circulation, which means that the purchasing power of the dollar goes down. And, you know, if you think about, again, when I was a kid, things like, you know, a can of Coke or can of Pepsi, were selling for 25 cents in a vending machine. So for 1/4, you were able to get that particular thing. A can of Coke or a can of Pepsi doesn't go for $1. It doesn't go for 25 cents anymore. It goes for $1 or sometimes more. So basically, your purchasing power has gone down because there's more dollars out there. All right. Now, I'm not going to get into a huge thing about what this has to do with the Fed and how this kind of ensures that, to a certain extent, the rich get richer and the poor get poorer. But ultimately, inflation is one of those concepts that you need to at least understand on a minuscule level. You need to understand it at least a little bit, and recognizing the fact that if the government tries to send you a stimulus check, all right, tries to give you money, they're not giving you money. They're actually taxing you. They're taking money away from you to a certain extent. I know that sounds kind of backwards and you think, oh, the government giving me stimulus is actually going to help me. It's probably actually doing the population of America a little bit worse. It's creating more problems than it's solving, but we're not going to get too much into that. Just recognize the fact that every time that the United States government and the Fed put out more money, your purchasing power is going down. So let's just imagine that you put $100 underneath your bed 50 years ago. That $100 is almost worthless now because of the fact that it's not got the value that it had 50 years ago. All right, that $100 is worth nowhere near as much. And hopefully you can start to understand that in order to make your money stronger, you need to put it into assets. And we'll talk about that in just a few minutes. All right, so let's talk about this on the sideboard. All right, I was born in 1975. Obviously, some of you are probably much younger than I am. But the thing is in 1975, there was a certain amount of money. I don't have exact numbers. We don't really need to have exact numbers, all right? But my parents had just bought a house. I think they bought that house for something around $30,000, et cetera, et cetera. And what happens is the federal government has the ability to print more money. And basically what happens is, just like a soccer ball that has been inflated, okay, it gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And the more money that is printed means that if there was $1 that you had in 1975, okay? In 1975, you have $1, and that has a certain amount of purchasing power, okay? So the purchasing power in 1975, okay, you put 30,000 of those dollars together, and you could buy the house that my parents lived in at the time, all right? But because of inflation, there's more money in circulation, which means that the purchasing power of the dollar goes down. And, if you think about, again, when I was a kid, things like, a can of Coke or a can of Pepsi, um, were selling for 25 cents in a vending machine. So for 1 quarter, you were able to get that particular thing. A can of Coke or a can of Pepsi doesn't go for $1. It doesn't go for 25 cents anymore. It goes for $1 or sometimes more. So basically, your purchasing power has gone down because there's more dollars out there. All right. Now, I'm not going to get into a huge thing about what this has to do with the Fed and how this kind of ensures that, to a certain extent, the rich get richer and the poor get poorer. But ultimately, inflation is one of those concepts that you need to at least understand on a minuscule level. You need to understand it at least a little bit, and recognizing the fact that if the government tries to send you a stimulus check, all right, tries to give you money, they're not giving you money. They're actually taxing you. They're taking money away from you to a certain extent. I know that sounds kind of backwards, and you think, oh, the government giving me stimulus is actually going to help me. It's probably actually doing the population of America a little bit worse. It's creating more problems than it's solving, but we're not going to get too much into that. Just recognize the fact that every time that the United States government and the Fed put out more money, your purchasing power is going down. So let's just imagine that you put $100 underneath your bed 50 years ago. That $100 is almost worthless now because of the fact that it's not got the value that it had 50 years ago. All right, that $100 is worth nowhere near as much. And hopefully you can start to understand that in order to make your money stronger, you need to put it into assets. And we'll talk about that in just a few minutes. Keep your money working. We're going to talk about that in just a minute here. But ultimately, what people have a tendency to do is they think, I got money, now I need to do something with it. And what they have a tendency to do is actually turn that money back over to other people. And I want you to try and keep your money if you can, and not just keep it, but get it to work for you. Okay, so we're going to talk formations, and there are all kinds of formations that you could run in this world. All right, we've got things like the 4-4-2, which is very classic. All right, semi-defensive, but you've also got the two forwards there. All right, you ultimately could score a lot of goals using a 4-4-2. We obviously did when I was younger. The 4-3-3 has become really, really popular over the last few years, and a derivative thereof is the 4-2-3-1, which is largely almost the same exact formation, but it's just an organizational principle of how you look at playing with those positions. Okay, 4-1-4-1. This is something that you see as well. Okay, you've got people who have that, defensive midfielder in front of your back four. All right, and then we've got the 3-5-2 or the 5-3-2, depending on how it is that you look at that. All right, you need the good center backs. All right, 5-3-2 is a little bit more defensive. You talk more about your wing backs there. And then the 2-3-5. I know that most people who are listening to this would never play a 2-3-5, but that was actually one of the formations that we started out with when nobody knew anything. We would have two big kids in the back and three midfielders and then five forwards. Now, therein is where you're going to start to see that actually you need to recognize where it is that you are and what your needs are before you start, kind of mocking a formation. All right. The 1-0-10. What is that all about? Okay, that adds up to 11 still, but you don't have a goalkeeper if you've got 1-0-10. All right, what could that mean? How does that work as a formation? All right, has Pete completely lost his mind? Not quite. We're just going to use the metaphor a little bit differently than you might expect. Okay, so building out of the back. All right, now what we've done is we have put titles onto the different positions. Okay, now most people are going to recognize these ones. All right, the goalkeeper, which would be your job or your income. All right, that's the way that you get money coming in. All right, the goalkeeper is the one who normally keeps the other team from scoring. But here, this is where we're going to start building all of your offensive type of maneuvers where you move the ball forward. Okay, the left back, we have things like insurance. Okay, life, car, home, liability, health, disability, long-term care, et cetera, et cetera. We've got all of those things as your left back. Your center back is your checking and your savings accounts. Okay, now these are things that most people end up having. Center back, all right, emergency fund, cash reserve, 3 to 6 months of mandatory living expenses saved. Okay, again, this is something that you probably heard a lot of financial people talk about before, is having 3 to 6 months worth of an emergency backup. All right, your right back is your estate plan, your will, your power of attorney, advanced medical directive, AKA a living will. Okay, now I am sure that you have probably heard of these, and or your parents, if you're the younger person, have probably all of these things. Okay, the checking and the savings account are probably pretty well known. The insurance thing is something that you're probably well aware of. All right, now the thing is that if you have all of these things, notice what these are. For our positioning, these are all defensive. Okay, they're all defensive positions. And if you think about, if you are a manager building a team, would you just buy defenders? Okay, would you only look at building a back four and that's it? And here's the thing is, some people don't have this. Some people don't have this. Some people don't have this. Some people just have this, and some people might not even have that. They would only have this, and they are just paying bills as they come along, et cetera. So recognize the fact that even though on a soccer team, you have to have 11 players, if you're playing a full-sided field, all right, you don't have to have 11 players in this financial world that we're talking about. You could have fewer, you could have more, and they don't have to particularly follow this normal format, but these positions are all defensive. All right, so if all you have, and when I talked about that 1-0-10, all right, what if you just had a checking account? Imagine you're still living with mom and dad, you're 17 years old or 16 years old, you've got this checking account, which is fine because you're underneath mom and dad's health insurance. All right, you don't have living expenses other than living at home, and you don't need an estate plan yet. So if you're one of those young people, you could get away with just this, possibly here, moving the ball up to there. All right, this is your midfield. All right, again, you've got your job or your income here. All right, but your number 8, your outside back. All right, we're not exactly using the perfect numbers with how you would play them normally, but these are going to be your secure investments, things like CDs, bonds, money market account. All right, your 6 is your holding mid, which is going to be your debt management. You're going to leverage that to your advantage. We'll talk about that in a little while. Okay, your right outside mid or forward, all right, is going to be your estate, your real estate or house. Okay, so your personal residence. Now, again, if you take a look at all of these, none of these are particularly sexy and huge money makers, but what they are is they're to do exactly what the midfield does on a regular basis. It moves the ball forward slowly. Okay, in the soccer world, you're not particularly, again, if you're buying players as the manager, okay, you're not particularly looking at these players to score all of your goals for you. They are the ones who are going to progress you forward. All right. They're going to get you moving towards the goal. They're not going to particularly take you to the goal. Now, if you talk about old school thought processes, all right, the American dream was always buy a house. Why was that the American dream? Because it was an easy message for people in the 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, whatever, to have an asset that would help move them forward. Okay. And so basically, assets are the things that actually make people, in air quotes, rich. All right. What happens is your assets are the things that are really going to make you money. If for no other reason, then you get to put your money into an asset, and inflation will raise the amount that that asset is worth. Okay. So for example, and I'm going to use this as my example, my parents buy their house in the 1970s, $30,000. Okay. They pay that house off slowly but surely over a course of many years. And basically what happens is, as the money is inflated, which we wish wasn't happening, but as the money is inflated over time, and they're paying that same $30,000 mortgage over the years as the money supply is getting inflated and the dollars are worth less, they're paying for that $30,000 house with money that is now worth less, but it still is taking care of that old debt. And what happens is, over time, in the 1990s, my parents' house was valued at over $300,000. So over that time period, from the 70s until the 90s, their house went up in value basically around 10 times. And because of that, my parents were able to accrue wealth through that thing. Well, what happens is that happens through the inflation. And if you think about it, that's a slow process. Over 20 some odd years, you're building up wealth over a certain amount of time. Okay. So ultimately, what's happening is the midfield positions are the ones that are going to take you forward, but they're not going to take you forward really fast. All right. Now we go into the forward line. Now, normally when you're a manager, these are the types of positions that you want to buy first. They're the ones who make the big money, okay, in the professional soccer world. You got your attacking mid, which is your core investments, large cap stocks. We'll talk about what the caps are on stocks, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, you've got your center forward, which is aggressive investments, international stocks, small cap stocks. And then the number 11, your left forward, you got the speculative investments. Okay, so the reason why these investments are called your forwards is because of the fact that these are the ones that can progress you forward relatively quickly. All right. The reason why these can move you forward quickly is the same reason why forwards are the ones who score the goals and are very valuable, is because of the fact that even though they're the exciting ones, they're the ones that can get you to the goal, they also come with a certain amount of risk. And the problem with players like, a Messi or a Ronaldo, or, going back a little bit, the Balotellis of the world, is that, or Mbappe in a modern context, is that these players have a tendency to be a little bit more volatile, and they don't produce all the time. Okay, when you get a striker who scores every single game, he's worth millions upon millions of dollars, but you don't always get that. All right, so core investments, large cap stocks. What are large cap stocks? Basically, large cap stocks are those ones that you hear about all the time on the New York Stock Exchange. Okay, those are the ones that you have multi-million-dollar companies, multi-billion-dollar companies. And the reason why they're called large cap is because of the fact that there are a lot of people who own stock in that particular company. Okay. There's 1 million shares. There's, however many shares worth of that particular thing. And ultimately, the reason why we have this as your core investments is because of the fact that, if you invest in things like the S&P 500 or the NASDAQ or anything like that, what you can do is by dealing in all stocks that are large cap, big companies, et cetera, is if you put enough of those into a basket, like they do in the S&P 500 or something like that, where it's an index fund. It's basically, you're not just hoping that one company is doing well. You've got your money spread over a large number of companies, and basically they move upward progressively. The center forward is the aggressive investments, okay? Small cap stocks. That's when you're taking a flyer on a smaller company, okay? You end up looking at, this small company in Idaho that possibly could go big or something like that, all right? International stocks, again, tend to be a little bit more volatile, et cetera. And then speculative investments, when you speculate, you are hoping that something's going to work out. And that could be a variety of different things, such as you starting a small business or investing in a small business. Those types of things have the potential to move you forward extremely quickly, but they come with a certain amount of risk. All right. So recognizing the fact that, hey, I am a 17-year-old kid, 18-year-old, we'll just make you into an adult for just a second, is that the ability to start investing in the stock market in even a small amount early on, that's where that 110 formation that I was talking about before is you have your income and you could absolutely put a lot of your money into the stock market and sit on that in the hopes that, over time that ends up making you a ton of money. All right. Now, this is the thing that most people haven't really considered yet. This is all great. Okay. The things that I talked about, you building a formation, you deciding on what it is that you want to spend your money on, moving the money around within your team. Okay, that's all great. Oh, you're investing in stocks, and that comes back to your goalkeeper, which is income, and you can just redistribute it. If you can keep the money within your team by moving it from your goalkeeper to your checking account, moving it up to your house or something along those lines, that's the way that you build wealth. It's going to happen over time. If you're using your midfielder, it's going to happen slowly. Your defense is basically just there to protect you for the most part. It's not really moving you forward. Your forward players are going to move you forward more quickly, but they come with a risk, and you want to be aware of that. The other team is where most people put their money. All right. Emotional spending, taxes. All right. That's the everywhere defender. Pressure from salespeople. We talked about the influence earlier. Interest, bills and expenditures, luxuries, liabilities and loans, waste. Okay. This is actually where most of the money that people get into their pockets end up putting it. All right. They don't put the money into their own pockets. They put it into the pockets of other people. All right. Because of the fact that most of us, put myself into that category, most of us weren't educated on what you should be doing with your money. Now, obviously, we all need to live. We need to eat. We need to have a place to live and things like that. All of those things fall under necessities, all right? So there's going to be times where you're putting the money into other people's hands because you have to, okay? No team, even that Barcelona team that was great at possession, kept 100% possession of the ball, okay? They had to give the ball away from time to time, if for no other reason than to give the other team a kickoff. after they scored a goal or at halftime. So ultimately, you're never going to keep 100% possession of your money, but trying to limit the number of times that you just randomly give money to the other team, that would be key. Okay. Now, defining success. Now, for you, depending on who you are, success may be very different from what it is for me or anybody else. We have the Premier League table right here, and for some of the teams in the Premier League, it's win a championship or get into the Champions League. Those are the only successful seasons when they do that. All right. Versus some of the teams down here towards the bottom, their only goal is to survive the season, to stay in the Premiership and to stay in business. All right. So basically, depending on who you are, you've got to define what success is for you. Now, I'm again not giving you financial advice. All right. If you are completely comfortable with the idea of, I only have a back line, I'm only defensive, I just keep my family and myself afloat, and I'm okay with giving all of my money to, BMW or Apple or whatever it is, and I'm not getting any of their stock, I'm just getting their products, and that makes you happy, hey, okay, not a problem. I do not have an issue with that. That's your decision. You're the manager. You're the one who has to make these kinds of calls. However, if you have a goal for, I am going to be able to retire early. I want to be able to build my own home. I want to be able to move into a bigger house or something like that. Defining what success is for you and what you want your money to do for you. All right. Because if all you want is the possessions and you need to have it now, well, that's one thing. But if you have a bigger set of goals that you want to hit, you may need to either put some midfielders onto the field that are slowly building your wealth, or you might need to invest into some forwards that are going to move your money forward more quickly. And recognizing the fact that inflation is always working against you unless the government all of a sudden decides, and I wish they would, to not print any more money, that basically we are going to stop printing money from here forward. It's why Bitcoin, if you've looked into that at all, ends up being a interesting asset to possibly get into, is because of the fact that I believe the number is 21 million. There are 21 million Bitcoins. That's it. They're not going to create any more Bitcoin, but they can divide it up into more and more pieces. That's why the value of Bitcoin keeps on going up. I know that it's volatile and it goes up and down and things like that, but ultimately, considering where it was a few years ago, Bitcoin is a uninflatable. It's not going to, the value of Bitcoin's not going down because of the fact that there's even more Bitcoin. The value of Bitcoin keeps on going up at the moment because of the fact that there's only the 21 million. Having said all of that, all right, you again need to decide what success looks like for you financially. What are the things that you need to do in order to get to where it is that you want to go? And if you have no forwards in your portfolio or in your team, that's completely fine, but just recognize that. Recognize where you are. And by looking at the defensive mindset of, I've got these 4 backs, or maybe not even 4 backs, I've got the 2 backs. All right. Recognize the fact that that's where most people live, that not a lot of people have a back line, a midline, and a forward line. A lot of people are just dealing with that back line. All right. And whatever it is that you want for yourself financially, you've got to figure that out. You are the manager. All right. Now, I was doing this as a presentation for people at a certain point, but if you have any questions, please put them into the comments below. happy to answer them. My co-author, he is the financial guy. I am the soccer guy and the vision guy. So if you have questions that you want answered, please put them in the comments below, and we'll be happy to talk to you. All right. Have a great day, people.